I still remember the exact morning it all began. It was a Tuesday, early spring. The light outside my apartment window was that pale, sleepy kind, the kind that almost apologizes for waking you up. I was already awake, though, because I hadn't really slept. My brain had been doing laps all night, circling through the same pattern of guilt and frustration. The kind of internal monologue that goes, "You said you'd change. You said this year would be different. This was supposed to be my year." I had promised myself, again, that I'd get in shape, start writing, sleep earlier, meditate, eat better. The usual. And like every other January, I'd started strong. A new planner. Gym membership. A list of goals so polished it could have been printed on the cover of a self-help book. By March, it had all fallen apart. Not because I didn't want it. I did. I do. But after a couple of missed days, then a cold, then a project at work that went haywire, the willpower just vanished. The treadmill I'd set up in the corner was gathering dust, mocking me every morning. I hadn't written a page of my novel since January 10th. That morning, after I finally got out of bed, I didn't even try to make up for it. I brushed my teeth, checked my phone, and found myself scrolling through articles that promised 6 easy ways to stop procrastinating, and this one trick will change your life. But one headline was quieter than the others. You change best by feeling good, not by feeling bad. That stopped me. It was from someone named BJ Fogg, a behavior scientist at Stanford, apparently. I didn't know it then, but that quote would become the doorway to something that finally made sense. Feeling good? Not guilt. Not shame. Not 5 a.m. boot camps or kale smoothies I hated. Feeling good. It felt like someone had whispered a truth I'd always suspected but never dared to believe. So I clicked. The article was about something called tiny habits. The idea was simple: instead of trying to overhaul your life, you start with habits so small they seem almost ridiculous. Flossing 1 tooth. Doing 1 push-up. Writing 1 sentence. I actually laughed. I mean, come on, 1 push-up? But the more I read, the more it made sense. The mistake I'd always made, that most people make, is thinking that change has to be big to be meaningful. That transformation requires discipline and motivation. But Fogg's research showed something else: motivation is fickle. If you rely on it, you will fail. It's not about feeling inspired. It's about making the behavior so easy, it doesn't require inspiration at all. So I decided to test it. The next morning, I didn't lace up for a 5-mile run. I did 1 push-up. Right there, next to the sink, after I brushed my teeth. And then, following BJ Fogg's instructions, I stood up and smiled. Not a sarcastic smirk. An honest, ridiculous, celebratory smile. I even said, "Nice job." Out loud. To myself. I won't lie, I felt a little dumb. But I also felt lighter. That 1 push-up didn't change my body. But it shifted something in my mind. I had set out to do something, and I had done it. No struggle. No self-loathing. Just a tiny win. One that felt surprisingly good. So I did it again the next day. And the next. And soon, I found myself doing 2 push-ups. Then 5. Not because I had to. Not because I felt guilty. Just because it felt good. That was the first time I understood what BJ Fogg meant when he said, emotions create habits. Not repetition. Not grit. Just positive emotion, right after the behavior. And let me tell you, the push-up was just the beginning. I started designing more of these tiny habits. Fogg called them recipes. You take an action you already do reliably, like brushing your teeth, pouring your morning coffee, taking off your shoes, and you attach a new habit right after it. After I brush my teeth, I'll floss 1 tooth. After I pour my coffee, I'll open my notebook and write 1 sentence. After I pee, I'll do 1 squat. Yes. 1. There was no pressure to do more. The idea wasn't to achieve a result immediately. The idea was to build the behavior, to become the kind of person who does that sort of thing. And slowly, I did. The strangest part? These tiny actions, so tiny they seemed silly at first, began to ripple outward. 1 push-up turned into 10. 1 sentence turned into half a page. 1 deep breath after a moment of stress led me to pause more often, respond more calmly. The tiny habit wasn't the ceiling. It was the floor, the launch pad. And it worked not because I was aiming higher, but because I stopped feeling like I was failing. The more I practiced, the more I started to feel like someone who had good habits, not someone who was trying to build them. That subtle shift, from effort to identity, was everything. I wasn't forcing myself to write. I was becoming a writer. I wasn't pushing myself to exercise. I was becoming someone who moved every day. And that made me realize, habits aren't just about productivity. They're about identity. Who you are becoming, one small action at a time. I also learned how to adjust when things went wrong, and they still did. But instead of giving up, I just scaled the habit back down. On a bad day, I didn't need to do 10 push-ups. One was still a win. One sentence was still writing. One breath was still calming. There was no all or nothing. There was always something. One of my favorite discoveries was the idea of pearl habits, turning difficult or negative moments into triggers for positive action. Like an oyster turning irritation into a pearl. Every time I felt stressed, I'd close my eyes and breathe deeply, just once. Every time I felt lonely, I'd send a kind message to someone. Every time I got frustrated, I'd unclench my jaw and stretch my arms. These weren't dramatic fixes. But they made life softer. Gentler. More human. Over time, I began to notice more opportunities. At work, instead of reacting with frustration to interruptions, I began to pause and smile, a tiny shift in emotion that helped reset my day. Before opening my laptop, I'd stretch my arms and say, "This is my time to grow." It sounds cheesy, but it helped. My colleague Priya started noticing. "You're always so calm lately." "What changed?" she asked one day during a meeting. I smiled. "Tiny habits," I told her. She raised an eyebrow. "Like what?" So I told her. About the one push-up. The one breath. The one sentence. And I could see it land with her the same way it had landed with me. Not as another productivity hack, but as permission to begin small. So small you can't fail. That weekend, Priya messaged me. "After I start the kettle, I stretch. Just 10 seconds. And I smile. You were right, it feels weirdly good." That's when I realized this thing spreads. Not because it's flashy, but because it's human. It respects real life. It works in the margins of our day. Weeks turned to months. My novel grew, a paragraph at a time. I still hadn't finished it, but I was becoming the kind of person who wrote regularly. I started sleeping better. Eating better. I even danced in the kitchen once while waiting for the microwave, a habit born from, after I pressed start, I moved for 30 seconds. One day, I visited my parents. My mom greeted me with a long hug. "You seem peaceful," she said. "I can feel it." And I knew she was right. The stress was still there, sure. But I had habits, small, solid ones, that kept me anchored. When my dad grumbled later about his knees hurting and how he should start walking again but never had the time, I gently said, "Why not just walk to the end of the driveway after lunch?" "Just that." He shrugged. "That's not even a workout." "Exactly," I said. "That's why you'll actually do it." That moment felt full circle, like I was passing down a secret. Not a method for change, but a mindset. You start tiny. You attach it to something solid. You celebrate. And slowly, you become. The next time I saw Priya, she introduced me to her brother, Nikhil, who had been struggling with anxiety. He was skeptical of anything that sounded like "just think positive." But she explained how tiny habits weren't about pretending everything was okay, they were about creating little footholds of control. Things you could count on. Start with something you do anyway, I told him. Like turning off your alarm. After that, say one kind thing to yourself. Just one. Doesn't even have to be out loud. He hesitated. Then nodded slowly. "Okay. I can try that." A few weeks later, he sent me a message. "After I turn off my alarm, I say, 'You're trying, and that matters.'" I don't always believe it. But it helps. That message brought tears to my eyes. Because this quiet, gentle revolution wasn't just helping me anymore. It was becoming something I could give. Months later, I found myself speaking at a local community meetup. Just a small gathering of people interested in habits and productivity. My story wasn't dramatic, no rock bottom, no grand turnaround. Just consistent, human change. I shared my journey. The one push-up. The stretches. The writing. The celebration. The days I didn't feel like doing anything but still whispered, "Nice job," after brushing my teeth. Afterward, a woman came up to me, probably in her 60s. She clutched her notebook, eyes moist. "I've been trying to lose weight for 30 years, she said. But after what you said, I'm going to celebrate putting on my walking shoes. Even if I never leave the house. My heart swelled. That's a win, I said. That's a habit. Now, when people ask how I finally changed, I smile and tell them the truth, I didn't. Not all at once. Not with a dramatic before and after. There was no perfect morning, number 30-day challenge, no vision board that finally worked. There was just me. Doing one push-up. One tooth. One breath. One step down the driveway. One kind word in the dark. One stretch at the kettle. One smile in the mirror. And celebrating every single time. Because I finally learned that real change doesn't start big. It starts tiny. And that's what makes it mighty.